Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode in the Run Breiter Podcast. Friends, we have returned from Chicago. Colleen, how does it feel to be back in our homeland of Denver after a successful marathon trip?
It feels weird. It feels good. It feels kind of nice to take in the slower season of life post-marathon training. Slower season of life post-marathon training, knowing that everything else is ramping up. But it feels good. How does it feel for you?
Feels good. Yeah, I mean, just for reference, we ran the Chicago Marathon this past Sunday. We're filming the episode of this podcast now the Wednesday after, so just a few days after. And what I figured we'd talk about today was going to be, or is, in fact, going to be a recap of our experience running the Chicago Marathon. So this way, if you're thinking of trying to qualify for the race or entering the lottery or to raise a generous load of money to charity, you know what you're getting into. So welcome to the episode, and we'll get things kicked off. So first, Colleen, this was your first marathon. You've done ultra marathons, you've done half marathons. So going from not ever running like a road marathon in a city that puts on a show, right? Because Chicago and New York City, Boston, those are the big ones that in the States we think of when we think of big road marathons. But even in Denver, Austin, Miami, some of the other cities I've ran marathons in, you get that same sort of feel. But you went from never doing a road marathon at all to what actually ended up being the largest road marathon in the United States ever. Tell me about it. How was your experience running this race?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. For context, more people ran this Chicago Marathon than live in my hometown by like a lot. It was like 51,150 people finished the Chicago Marathon, I think, and my hometown clocks in at like 38,000 people.
Who's counting?
You're right. Right. Who does that concern? But it was wild to see the city be so supportive. Like, I think it was estimated to be over 1 million people were spectating. The crowds were pretty intense. The crowds running was also pretty intense. So that was not quite something that I anticipated to last throughout the whole race. I kind of expected it to open up a bit more at mile 5 or mile 18, and the opening up never occurred. But I did appreciate all the signs, all the support, all the cheering. That was really cool to experience.
Yeah, and just to give everyone perspective, there's multiple waves. Myself, I started in the first wave at 7:30. I ended up actually starting at more like 7:42, just because of the amount of people within the wave and the amount of time it takes to have one person after the other pass the starting line, right? And you were supposed to start at 8. I think you were around that same
8:12.
8:12. Yeah, we were both 12 minutes after when we were supposed to start. And I can't speak for the rest of the race, but I'm sure there were people still getting started probably after 9. And so they do a good job of spreading it out for sure. However, when you have that amount of people, it is going to be chaotic. It is going to be crowded. And throughout the entire race, I mean, I definitely feel similar. It was constantly being passed or passing people throughout the entire race, really. But I will say the crowds made this experience very epic. I mean, comparing this race to New York City, which, is something that some people might be curious about, I think there was more of a consistent crowd. There wasn't probably like the level of energy that there was at certain hot spots within New York City. However, you really in this race knew that regardless of where you were running, there was going to be someone cheering you on, which I thought was really great. What do you think of having crowds compared to being in a trail with your only crowds being, plants and birds, pretty much.
It was fun. It was fun. I mean, even like the bridges and overpasses that you ran on had crowds on them. I will say the crowds at times made narrow streets even more narrow, which made it even harder in a crowding sense. But it was really cool to constantly have cheering and support. And I think that that's also good, especially with the marathon being such like a challenging race, that a lot of people do have like injuries or health events that occur. And with it being so crowded, so well spectated, I mean, if you're gonna have a health injury during any race, during the Chicago Marathon is probably the one that you want to have it in, because people are there immediately to respond. So that's a benefit of it.
Yeah. And I think the nice thing too, outside of that crowd, right? I mean, obviously we all know Chicago being that race of energy. I think, like, logistically speaking, there was pros and cons of this race. I would say that a pro was that throughout the entire race, right, there was ample opportunity to get water, Gatorade, all that. Even if you weren't in a, what they call hydration zone, there was even spectators handing out water bottles, which I definitely took advantage of, and food and bananas, all the stuff you'd need.
Shout out to the people handing out little sticks with Vaseline on them at mile 17. That was great.
Yeah. But, I think when we talk about the logistics of entering the race, compared to New York City, right, like you have to go on a ferry and on a bus and all these things for New York City. This was nice because you could just literally walk up to the start line. Now, once you got on site, it was definitely really crowded as far as like the bathroom lines and the amount of people in the space that it was. But I think overall, like, it was as well managed as it could be for the amount of space they had for 50,000 plus people. Any like additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it was like as good as it could have been. I'm sure that there's probably a better way to do it. Like if they
always, yeah.
At least with the bathrooms, because I know that the instructions were like, we have plenty of bathrooms, so if like the line is really full, just go to like the next location of bathrooms. But it was not clear where the next like location of bathrooms were at all times. But other than that, like gear check went seamlessly. It was like you walked up, you handed them your stuff, and you were gone. Like there wasn't even a line.
Yeah.
The corrals were big enough, I think, for the amount of people per corral. Did get a little crowded.
I mean, I personally wasn't in my corral until after the corral start time, but they eventually got me in once. Like, it wasn't there. There was a little bit of a delay getting in, but it's not like they didn't let me go in my corral, thankfully.
Yeah.
They do, in my opinion, as good of a job as they possibly can to like organize it. But you're dealing with human beings, and when you arrive, right, it's not like you have someone giving you a tour of like, here's where all the bathrooms are, here's where they're not, here's where you need to go here. You have to ask people, you have to communicate, and there's a lot of things happening quick. The clock is going down, you want to get your warm-up in, your stretches, you want to drink your water, you want to go to the bathroom. And so I think it's an overwhelming environment with the number of people that they have, with the amount of space that they have. But I think considering, I do think, like, they do a good job. But I think if you're someone that, like, you don't do well with big crowds, or if you've got, digestive issues before a race and you're going to need to go to the bathroom more than once, just something you might want to be aware of going into something like this. I'm not saying it should be a reason that you shouldn't, but it's certainly, like, it's a lot. It's a lot. But, I mean, I think that is, worthwhile for people to know. What did you think of, like, take aside the crowds and, like, how busy everything was, what do you think of, like, the overall, like, course itself, and being able to run through Chicago?
I loved the course to be able to see all the different neighborhoods in Chicago, to just experience the city in a different way. And I could only imagine, like, how interesting that would have been for people, like, in the city, too, to, like, people that are on, like, higher apartments to look out, and they probably could have seen, like, just thousands of people running for like miles.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been super cool. And I just really liked like all of, we took an architecture tour of Chicago before the day before the race, and a couple of days before the race, and like it was nice to be able to kind of like appreciate, I don't know, the scenery like a little bit more, knowing that there's so much going on. But yeah, the course itself, I thought it was really nice. Like I thought that it was easy to navigate. Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I've been to Chicago prior to this race experience twice, and I think this whole weekend, right, of being able to, like, do some things before the race and then run the race itself, really, like, familiarize myself with, like, the overall feel and vibe of the city, and, like, I feel like I would see, like, an image now, and I would know whether or not it's Chicago, where maybe prior to the weekend, I would be like, oh, is that New York? Is that, a city in Europe? I would have no idea, right? So I think that's the best part of running one of these big marathons, especially ones that aren't like a loop or an out and back. It allows you to explore an entire city in one day. And then if you're doing other little things within the weekend, you can reflect on some of those things that you saw during the race or some of the things that you're going to see during the race. I mean, I know when we saw the blue line set up, before the race, we were getting pumped, and you just saw like a bunch of banners all over the city advertising the marathon. I mean, to me, and I felt this way when I did New York City, but it was cool to see that Chicago is the same way. It feels like you are in the Super Bowl when you show up for this marathon, based on like how much everything is about the marathon. You see everyone wearing the gear. You see the banners, like I said. There's announcements about it everywhere on the radio. The TV networks are discussing it. So it's cool to like feel like you are like doing something that is like so important. That's also like exclusive, because not everyone can run this race. Not everyone has the ability to do it or can get in right away. And so I think that made it really special.
Yeah, and I think it was really special too. Like, obviously Chicago is a fast course. Both of the current world records for marathons, both men and women, are at the Chicago race course. People go there to set records for themselves, the world. And I think it's just really cool that it's becoming like, I mean, it's historically been trying to compete with the New York City Marathon. But I think they're two very different, but two very good races. But I just think that it was really cool. Yeah, and like the whole city shuts down. Like the businesses on the streets. Sam and I got pedicure. I'm outing you out for getting pedicures. Sam and I got pedicures the day after, and like we found out that the businesses along the route had to, like, they were ordered to close down for the marathon because like the crowds were so big that like no one would be able to get in. Which was wild. I didn't even like consider that, but it makes sense. Yeah. Like how would a taxi or an Uber get you there if the roads are shut down, right? But
yeah, and I think like something to consider. Right? We did spend a lot of time talking about the crowds. As far as like me and Colleen's performance, this was your only marathon, but you hit your goal of breaking 4 hours, which congratulations, Colleen.
Thank you.
Right by 18 seconds, so it was close. I was tracking her towards the end, but she hit it. I had my second fastest marathon ever running, 3:06 and change. Thank you. Which is a little short of my goal. I do think Chicago is a race that should be considered if you want to run your best possible marathon time. I think you want to consider that, hey, it's going to be crowded, so there's potential you might run a little bit more than 26.2 miles, but there's very few marathons where you have a crowd throughout the entire race supporting you and runners nearby you, so there is a benefit of that. But if you are someone that like doesn't need the crowd, you're self-motivated on your own, you want to carry a backpack with you with water because Chicago doesn't allow backpacks during a race, well, maybe it's not going to be the best bet for a race, for you. But it's at sea level. It's very flat. I think I gained 299 feet of elevation. Most marathons I've done have been above 500 feet of elevation gain. So I guess to answer my question that I created right here is that if you're going for a PR, I think it's a really good option.
Looking back on the race experience, is there anything like different that you would have done, like either in training or in the race itself?
Kind of agree with you in the sense of like future world majors. I definitely would rather like soak in the crowd and just have like a good time at these races.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it's like a big like financial investment as far as like the travel being higher than like typical travel because of the amount of people that go into the cities for these races. They're also really like luxurious, expensive cities. And then, of course, there is the factor that the race tends to be the most expensive out of the marathon options out there. And so, yeah, I agree. Like, I would totally have, moving forward, if I did another Chicago or did another World Major Marathon, want to just have fun with the race, with the crowd. But I would say, like, regarding my training, you know, obviously I came about 7 minutes short of my time. I think that what prevented me from getting to the goal really more than anything was like my legs overall getting pretty shot at mile 18 and then kind of having some negative self-talk with myself about the goal overall that I've been working towards. And, you know, I've attempted a few times to break a 3-hour marathon. You know, I think also it didn't help knowing that in the middle of the training block that Boston had faster qualifying standards, and so the 3-hour goal was just really a time goal. It wasn't a goal that was going to open up an opportunity in which I've wanted to get for quite a while. But, I mean, regarding the training, I think what made it a little bit difficult was that I do coach like a running group once a week, and I feel like as a result, there were certain workouts that I was doing either not hard enough or perhaps even too hard with a group rather than like managing my own coaching plan and like doing the workouts that I wanted to do that always made sense. You know, when you're not fully structured with your plan and you're going after such a precise, specific time, it can be challenging for sure. And so that's something I definitely dealt with. I definitely need to focus on speed. Living in Denver and having a hard time breathing here, it is hard to like consistently hit marathon paces when I'm training, especially in the heat of the summer. And so like if I were to go for the 3-hour goal yet again, which I honestly haven't made a decision if I'm going to continue pursuing that goal, and if I am, like when I'm going to do that, I do think I would look at like a November race that would give me more time to train in cooler weather, or like a spring race, right? Like a April or May race. And I would really make sure to like focus in on speed. I think I did build up enough endurance this year. I had a 70-mile peak week. I don't think I need to go above that. But, you know, I think those are some areas. And I do think like while I am a coach, I would benefit from having someone coach me. And so I do think if I went through this exercise again and gave this sub-3 thing another shot, I think I would benefit from having someone coach me, because when you're coaching a sales team for a full-time job, when you're coaching other runners and then you need to coach yourself, sometimes you don't give yourself as much time within your own self to reflect and to be critical. And so I think that I could really benefit from having that if there was another time of going for sub-3. I'm curious though, kind of taking a step back, I mean, what do you think of like the activities associated with being in Chicago outside of the marathon, between the expo, the shakeout runs that we went to, and some of the other events that, you know, we saw going on within the city?
Yeah, I thought that it was really fun. Like, I thought that it was a great time. I think that, like, Chicago really shows up. And, like you said earlier, like, you know, you feel like you're, like, a celebrity. Like, the city is, like, excited for you to be there and to run the race. And, like, they want you to help stimulate their economy, right? Like, they just really, like, have a welcoming atmosphere, I think. The shakeout run was fun. I think it was a good precursor to the marathon because the shakeout run was crowded too. So then it kind of like gave me a bit of, it helped me get more used to what I'd be seeing the next day. And then like, was it Fleet Feet? Like the Fleet Feet New Balance?
Yeah, so we went to an event with Fleet Feet that was also being hosted by New Balance and Endorphins Running Group, and then I think another running group too. So there was multiple groups. There was like 1,000 people that all gathered within a really cool area of Chicago, went on a 3-mile shakeout run. Definitely got like some cool videos of all the runners and everything like that. There were like a lot of running influencers there and just people who were running the races, which was awesome to be a part of that. And then, yeah, there was a pop-up in the Fleet Feet where the store wasn't selling anything. The whole store was, crane machine with giveaway items. There were spray painting opportunities for either a hat or a tank top, which was really cool. They were giving away breakfast burritos, bagels, juices, coffee. There was like literally a barista there, which you don't really see those things very often. So that event I thought was like one of the cooler running events I've been to. And, I think overall on the weekend we came home with a lot of free stuff. While it was an investment to go, we definitely got somewhat of our money's worth.
I think we got all of our money's worth back just in BioFreeze products. The amount of BioFreeze salmon I now own is like shocking.
Yeah.
Thank you, BioFreeze. We are looking for a sponsor. But anyway, no, like that New Balance Fleet Feet event was super fun. They had like a claw machine thing where you could like win New Balance shoes. You could win like a gift card. They had like nice breakfast burritos, a photo op. They had food, the barista, the spray painted thing. Like you could get, like if you wanted to get a racing tank top that had like your name on it, you could get it there. And it was all free, which was super fun, super cool. The expo, absolutely loved. They offered like an availability for you to switch your shirt free of charge, which I thought was nice. Because sometimes, like, as a woman buying, like, a woman's fit shirt is, like, sometimes a small can fit, or sometimes I need an extra large, and it's hard to tell. So I thought that was a fun, like, bonus that they had thrown in. And then, like, just all the vendors at the expo, all the random things that they had. We both have this really fun, it's not, what is it? It's like the fun, like slime. It's like slime. It's like a fancy slime.
These little things that you appreciate. It's like putty. What? It's
okay,
like putty.
Sam's making fun of me for bringing this up, and he's been playing with this thing more than I have. But the putty, like, is so fun. There's like the Slime Institute of Chicago, and the slime is like scented. Like it smells like blue raspberry, and it's very fun. It's very nice. I should probably stop talking about this now because I'm sure it'll get edited out. But like, I just loved all the fun random stuff that was at the expo, including slime.
Yes, there were hundreds. Go ahead.
And then the food of Chicago was phenomenal. I don't think that there was a meal that we had that was not great. Like, we tried out probably three different Italian places? Four different Italian places.
Alright, you were talking about the food.
Yeah, the food was just phenomenal. Sam got to try deep dish pizza for the first time.
I did.
He's still a thin New Yorker kind of guy, but, New York pizza kind of guy. I think everything there was great, though. Like, even, like, our hotel coffee was phenomenal.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, yeah, we did the trip right. We stayed in a nice hotel. We got in early, right? Like, I think doing some of these things, like, when you have such a special opportunity to, like, run such an incredible race, might as well treat yourself if you can, right? Yeah. We stayed at a hotel that was nice and local to the race and set ourselves up for success with some nice dinners, and we're able to celebrate that. So overall, like, really, really special weekend. I'm super glad that we got to do it together. I know sometimes people will travel solo for these marathons, and I've done it before, and maybe I'll do it again, but it was very nice having you along my side, and, it was cool seeing how you just, like, appreciated the different things around the entire weekend, so, yeah. But I guess, like...
we didn't talk about the architecture tour that much.
Okay. Yeah, we can talk about it.
I just want to give a shout out to the architecture tour of Chicago. If you're in Chicago at any point, like, I think you should do it, because it's like you get to, you're in a boat and you go through the river, and like they point out all of this like wonderful information about the architecture, and then they take you out and you get like this beautiful scene of like the Chicago skyline. And I just thought it was really fun. It was the perfect thing for us to do a couple days before the marathon, because you have to sit down the entire time, right? But I think just in general, if you're in Chicago broadly, you should totally look into it. And I think it's pretty affordable too. Like,
yeah, I think it's like $50, and the nice thing about that was that we got, I think, 10 or 20% off, because we had the marathon that we were signed up for. So like that's the thing too. Like, if you're running a marathon in one of these big cities, especially the world majors, they do a lot of things to get back to the runners. Like, there was like bib and engravings going on. There was a lot of discounts at local businesses, and so take advantage of those things when you do these experiences. It makes it worthwhile. Obviously, you talked about us walking around with our medals, so obviously, like, not only on the financial side but the emotional support side, there's definitely a lot of that there, which is really cool. So, yeah, I think the last thing that'd be worthwhile to talk about is, in the professional field, some of the accomplishments that we saw. The overall winner of the race, John Career, I believe is how his last name is pronounced. It's Korir. He ran like a 2:02. Chicago last year had the world record in the marathon done by Kiptum, who's no longer with us. However, a 2:02, phenomenal time, just 2 minutes short of the world record. So while we did talk about the crowds, I mean, for the professionals, right, because they're out in front, there's not as many people with them, it's a great race for them to certainly break records, and we saw that. Then there was also Ruth, and I apologize, I don't fully know how to pronounce her last name, so I'm not going to attempt it here on this moment, who broke the world record for the woman, right under 2:10. She is getting like a little bit of controversy right now. A lot of people accusing her of doping because of how significant that record is. I mean, any thoughts on that on your side, Colleen?
Yeah, and before we chat on that, I also wanted to shout out that there was a course record set in the women's wheelchair division as well. So we have para-athletes that competed. And Catherine, I believe from Switzerland, she set a new course record in the women's wheelchair division. But yeah, Ruth has gotten a lot of flack for her performance, not just because of the discrepancy between like the previous world record and how much she broke the record by, but also a lot of people were looking at Ruth's previous events and kind of saying like the math is not mathing, essentially, like indicating that there was no way based on her previous performances that she should have been able to break the 2:10 barrier for women. And I mean, I think that there is like a healthy amount of skepticism that can be possible, right? But I think that perhaps we've crossed that line with a lot of like seeming just kind of like hatred coming towards Ruth from other runners. So it's unfortunate, because I would like to, believe not only in like the capability of a woman to run such an impressive time, but also in the ability that, like, sometimes the stars just align and you have a really good race, and like you have things that allow you to perform significantly better. I didn't mention this earlier, but like I had stomach issues as well during the Chicago Marathon, and I think if I didn't have those stomach issues, then I could have done like, you know, a couple minutes faster, right? And so, you know, I don't think we know the full story of like, you know, maybe not all of the stars were quite aligning for all of Ruth's other performances, and maybe they did for her recently on Sunday. Who knows? I think that there is, like I said, a normal amount of skepticism, but I think that that should not be like your first conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I just think like, in general, no one in athletics should be guilty until proven innocent, right? Like, why just assume that someone didn't do something or didn't earn something when we have literally zero evidence providing that, besides historical trends from like a specific nation or a specific coach, right? Like, there's obviously circumstances and there's a lot of like bad apples out there, but that doesn't mean that someone else is. And when I hear, hey, like, you look at our other races, it doesn't compare, like, that's bullshit. Like, there's so many people who will have significant PRs. You know, I myself have done it in many races, and I know she's a professional, and I know the level of improvement when you're at that level is harder. However, like, she could have had a very long training build, or she could have been holding herself back in other races because she didn't think she had a chance to win those. And this was her time where she has reached her peak athletic build, right? You know, so we never know. Could she have doped? Yes. Could the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh place runners also dope? Yes. We have no idea. So, like, you know, obviously they could be doing testing and different things, but the truth is, the people who are doing these things will typically get exposed because they're often greedy, and they often continually want to earn success, want to be running other races, continually earning prize money, going to the Olympics, whatever it might be. And eventually you're going to stumble upon a test that's going to catch you, because the technology, as far as figuring out whether people are doping or not, has only gotten better through the years, which is why so many of these athletes have gotten caught, right? I'm not saying that there aren't people who have doped and have gotten away with it, and I'm sure there will be more that will, but I don't think having the mindset that this is a fraudulent effort is fair to her support group, to just the whole concept of it. And it's like, why have a negative mentality about something that was so historic and so amazing? And so I'll believe it until I can't.
Yeah, and I think it also brings the question of like, would we be questioning this record as intensely if this record had come from an American athlete? If this record had come from a country that wasn't facing current criticism for PEDs and other athletes. And I think that we should not be, assuming that people that come from specific countries are just automatically going to be doping because some other people have. Like, that's not fair. And I think that like bias can result in a lot of really good and true hardworking athletes being, criticized whenever they shouldn't be. Again, we don't know if she doped, but like Sam said, I'm going to believe that this was a true record until proven otherwise, because I don't have any reason to doubt it at this point.
Yeah. Well, congratulations to, all the people who ran this year's Chicago Marathon, right? Whether you came in first in your age class, you set a record for the world or for yourself. If it was your first marathon or your 100th, either way, it's an accomplishment, right? Like we said earlier, Colleen hit her goal. Super proud of her. I came short, but anytime I put in an effort and I complete a marathon, I'm going to be proud of that. So hopefully you have that same mentality. And yeah, if you have any like individual questions about Chicago, right? Like, where do I stay? Where do I go eat? How do I figure out the cool events going on within the weekend? How should I pace the race, right? If you are planning on doing the 2025 race. Happy to be a resource any way I can. Happy to also help you with any coaching. So if you want to run next year's race or any marathon in general, or really any running event in general, let me know, and I'm happy to help. And friends, as always,
don't forget to run brighter.
See you again soon. Bye for now.